But you are deep into this anarchist type of thought, liberalism, freedom for individual.
Yeah.
When did that start?
I guess naturally I had it always, but I just didn't know that it was a thing. I found out like I had a yeah I did some content as a teen, uh, um, you know, talking to friends about that.
How old were you? Like
16, 17, just whacking things against the wall and seeing what sticks and just like exchanging like crazy notions.
well, yeah, these were real life friends or on the
Yeah, yeah,
internet
yeah.
mostly?
No, real
Real life.
life mostly.
Interesting.
Yeah, and yeah, just
Where in Belarus are you from?
Vitebsk.
Is that a small or big city?
It's one of the 6 bigger ones.
Okay.
So it's capital of the region of the administrative.
So these teenage ideas put you on a path that really has taken you quite.
Yeah, I just wasn't content with like how the school was set up in Belarus, and it was like basically replicating the whole of the Soviet kind of mindset, and the kind of the general kind of narrative, the general idea was of the school was to kind of beat the hell out of you, like emotionally and morally, as to destroy any buds of kind of
Yeah.
self-image, individuality, and a thing that would you hear typically is that you should do so and so for the sake of the government who takes care of you, and you should not talk about your rights. Like when some injustice
Yeah.
would happen at the school, like the children would say, "Oh, but we have rights, and this is a human rights. You violate a human rights." And the teachers and what the faculty and the administrative staff, they would higher up would say like, "But you're not even humans yet." Like
So,
and
so this was okay, anarchy against the system, very classic.
yeah, so basically I guess if I had to like come up with a narrative for myself, that would be it, that I faced the kind of the institutions that are created by 70 years of kind of and still lingering to this day of
Yeah.
this of the Soviet mindset of
And
like
we still
creating.
have similar schools, basically.
Yeah,
The schooling system is great.
but
The
it's
same.
not. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, like it's an industrial model.
Yes.
But it's not that, it's not that kind of soul sucking, and it's not that violent in the
That's even
West
worse, yes.
as it is in the societies that actually had like full on communism, and the negative selection
Yeah,
over
yeah.
the generations.
Why do you think that is? But in Soviet, well, it was there to actually, it was created to crush this
Of course.
freedom of the individual. Yes,
I
that
mean,
makes sense.
maybe it wasn't even created with. Maybe the people who were creating didn't think about it that way. But that
It
was
just
the
happened.
second order effect of what they created.
Do you think this is changing, or how do you think about it now, years later?
Oh, it's about the same. I see food like now. Maybe not anymore because they banned that thing. But like for a while in Belarus, like all of the children went around to school with smartphones, and they recorded their teachers. And the magnitude of the emotional abuse that teachers directed towards children was like, it's exactly. I mean, I remember that. Oh, sorry. I just bashed against the microphone. So like. I remember that stuff being more or less the same when I was at school, and it's just not that they were documenting it suddenly, and the parents started to see exactly what's happening.
So this
it's
was
now-
like a crisis in society. People saw that it was happening,
uh,
and it changed with that.
it's hard to say. What changed is no, I guess they just banned smartphones. Probably, I don't know like what's the current situation at schools, but like
Would you send your own children to school nowadays?
no.
What would you do instead? Not that it's yeah, well,
Homeschooling to the, if like, but that's hard to I mean, that's easy to tell if you have the means
Yeah. Yes.
to
Yeah.
to make it work. It's harder to tell somebody that you have to homeschool when like both parents work jobs full time, and there's no infrastructure. Like, what curriculum do you use?
Yep. Well,
Yeah,
you can do Khan Academy for math and figure it, but you have to figure it out yourself. It takes time and energy.
true. Yeah, it's easier for English-speaking societies where children speak English from
True.
early age. Not in China, for example, not in Japan, and yeah, and there are some countries where you cannot homeschool. They will take your children away, like in Germany.
What is something of Russian-speaking part of the world that the West don't understand, that you think people often misunderstand or don't know about? It could be Belarus, but it also could be, Russian-speaking in general. Something different, maybe.
I see that people in the West have no concept what communism was,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they,
How rough it really was, do you mean?
yeah, best case scenario, they know about Stalin, and they know that Stalin was, oh, that was terrible, but Germans had Hitler, and that was like that's what they did at the time, and that was kind of a one-off. So we can still think that communism overall was
What
not,
is
not so bad.
some example of what communism was like, actually?
Like if you were born in a village until 1977, okay, so no, back up. So there were this thing called internal passports instead of like what they now we have like national IDs or like cards. Most countries have like plastic card with your number and photos, like photo IDs. Like instead of that, the Soviets have had like literal passport, but only for internal travel.
Within Soviet Russia, yeah?
So that is what, because like they wanted to keep track of people internally.
Yeah, you couldn't leave your village unless you had permission.
So yeah, and so the people who were involved with the collective farms, which is everybody after the 30s, because all of the private property was taken over by the state, and there was no private enterprise whatsoever. Everything all land was owned by the state. All of livestock and machinery was owned by the state, and there was nothing that was actually not owned by the state in terms of means of productions and so forth.
Yeah.
So like if you lived in the village, you had to be like a part of that system, and you had to work at a collective farm. And until 1977, those people didn't get passports, so they could not even travel.
You were a prisoner in your life,
within your village. But then, even if you were like you were able, there were ways to kind of go to a community college and move to the city, and that was the dream for people. But then you find out that you are actually in a bigger prison, and like the system that kept people in and not allowing them to to get out when they want it. That's kind of should be pretty much at kind of how do I say that tells you about like what it is.
How rough it really was.
Yeah, because
it's a good point that it was a prison, in a sense, a big prison.
And everybody who, I mean, not everybody, but I guess, okay, I have to qualify this, but like the dream was for people to get out of it. And whenever there was an opportunity, there were, there were ways sometimes for people to emigrate, like in the 70s, when some politicians in the United States lobbied the government to make this deal with the Soviets. I think it was grain for Jews. So like the Jews were very much persecuted minority. You couldn't get into university. You had to, like, people changed their names and surnames to not be Jewish. People like if there was a way to kind of when you had a child and like one parent was Jewish and one not, There was always like, of course, like we write that the child will not be Jewish.
Why do you think there was so much Jewish hate going on? Because I feel like it's kind of coming back now with the war in Israel. It's like, well, why is it such a thing to hate on the Jews?
Well, that's a topic for a whole book. I can recommend a good one, Dennis Prager, Why the Jews?
Why the Jews?
Yeah, and it tells about like the roots of anti-Semitism according to this guy who is like a conservative Jewish kind of opinion kind of commentator.
So why is the in a nutshell?
Basically, he's in a nutshell that he said the Jews were the first to say that there is objective morality. Before the Jewish religion, everybody had their own God, and everybody's God kind of had if there were laws to speak of that kind of were dictated by the gods, which wasn't always the case. They only applied to those people who were
but the Jews tried to apply to everyone.
But the Jews came in and said, actually, like there is one God. All of your gods like a shit, and he created everything. He's cool, and not only did he create everything, he also told like that like this is how you live, and this is how you're supposed to live.
Right. So they were kind of aggressive on other religions in a way.
Yeah, they were, as you say, universalists, right?
But do you like to read a lot? Otherwise,
what do you mean?
books. Like, do you have any good, in general, book recommendations?
I find books kind of a little bit too not dense enough in terms of information. And whenever I try, because like I'm interested in a lot of topics,
Right.
but when okay, what would be the good books to read about it?
Yeah.
And then you always pick up a book that would be like supposedly promising, and
Yeah.
then you start reading it, and it's just like a lot of.
They often are too long for the. Yeah, I agree. It's.
And another thing that is, they always have to start from the the creation of the world, right? You want to learn about some specific thing, but then they start telling you about like
But you gotta skim through a lot of books. But
Yeah,
so if it's not books, then how do you get your information?
podcasts are good.
Yeah, they are good. What are some good podcasts you feel
Some good podcasts.
that you are listening to,
Actively right now, that are still active right now.
or not? It doesn't have that are maybe still relevant in some way, but doesn't have to be active.
It's hard to say like
Are they Russian or English? Do you listen mostly?
they're English speaking, yeah.
English speaking.
No, it's like there's very few that are general ones that kind of would be good to recommend, because most would be in kind of vertical,
Very specific topic.
to something.
Well, for example, give me some. It doesn't have to be the best, but what comes to mind? Some vertical, some good vertical.
I like Breedlove. What is money?
Ah, yeah, he's pretty good. And he's what is money, but he's pretty general at times.
Yeah, sometimes I don't listen to everything that he like to every interview, but
Yep.
Sometimes he has good people, and I think I was pretty much in between the debate of the crypto versus Bitcoin, and I think his podcast kind of turned me more into the Bitcoin side, and people who he had on to talk to. Yeah, just name a topic, and maybe it would be easier to me to
But
say.
you were gonna say something else. You were saying like podcasts and what else for information, like YouTube videos or
Nowadays it's just
talking with people. What is it?
YouTube videos are cool actually. There are plenty of lectures, but you have to first find a good speaker. So like, or you find a good institution maybe that hosts lectures, and they would select the speakers for you. Like there was this a series of lectures made by Independent Institute, for example, about economics, and they had professors from like Austrian school economics professors from like Hillsdale College, from Texas University, all of the usual suspects from Mises Institute
Is
associated.
it fair to say you search for information more on vertical?
Oh yeah.
Then
So
on,
like,
then on like
if I give you a good
general.
heuristics, like you follow interesting podcasts that interview people, and then you come across some interesting person,
Yes.
and then you start looking for what else they do,
Yes. Yes.
where else they have been, and then by
Makes sense.
next step you see like who else was on those podcasts, second level.
I like that.
And sometimes that would be not that would be like they would lead you to something like some like institution or a channel or some
That makes a
media
lot of
company
sense. Yes.
that kind of like
That the host that
I
type
think
of.
I found out about Balaji from an interview he did with Nick Gillespie on Reason TV, because I was following Reason TV as a libertarian magazine for years, and yeah.
What, you asked about like a vertical. What about the vertical of this? How did you describe it? Alternative living outside of the state. This. What is the word? You know what I'm talking about.
There are different words, like there's the term agorism.
Agorism. I haven't heard that one.
That's basically a practice of escaping the regulations and the financial and the fiscal constraints of the government, and building parallel institutions that exist in the gray or black market that provide goods and services outside of the government control,
Right.
without paying taxes. Or,
Right.
why paying some taxes, less taxes, right? There are degrees of it. There's also like a term counter-economics, similar to counterculture.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So a good, I mean, if this wasn't like, if you were editing it, I would just go to my podcast app and tell it.
You can do it. You can do it.
I know like Bob Murphy has a podcast. He is a professor of economics, and he talks about like general things, the theoretical things, like how would security be provided, or like how courts would work under free market without the government? How would like people not murder each other without the government? How would and then he has like people talk about Bitcoin as well, like Bitcoin versus crypto, and like economic science.
How do you see this Bitcoin versus crypto discussion? That isn't. I feel like there is some more value than just Bitcoin in blockchain. Isn't that clear? What is it about?
Well, Bitcoin people would say that everything that you can do on other blockchains, you can do on Bitcoin. It's just like on the second layer, for example, on the third layer. There are now developments with the, Nostr. Have you heard of it?
It sounds very familiar. Yes.
As far as I understand, it's like similar idea, but like it's like Farcaster-ish, but on Bitcoin.
So
Maybe I'm completely wrong because I'm not too deep into that.
on some second layer. Yeah. Bitcoin for sure has its uses. But what about? I was alluring to this like idea of alternative economics.
Yeah.
Because of this network state idea and anything in that arena, like interesting people or books or whatever that could be helpful for people going into this as we are now in the network
one
school.
thing that you can expand your mind completely and that will blow your mind is just like I think there's a 15-minute video, I think narrated by David Friedman, that is basically summarizes his book Machinery of Freedom, and it leads you in 15 minutes. It's on YouTube.
Machinery of Freedom.
Yeah, it leads you, because the book is again a little bit like it starts too far in the past and like you're not sure like whether or not you want to go through it. But the video is very concise, and it brings you from the current state of things where the government provides like everything, the police and like who will build the roads and so forth, to like how can a society function with all of those services being provided by the free market, by the competitive organization, like a commercial organization competing for customers, and how it will be beneficial for everybody in terms of that it will be more peaceful, more prosperous, and more just.
So that would be a society where there is no state, there is no need for the state, so to speak. everything would be.
Eventually, yeah, that's the idea. I think it's hard to get all the way there because there are issues that are not as easily addressed by the free market as some other issues. So, for example, I mean, social security. Like, there's no reason for social security not to be provided by not like commercial organization, but by voluntary, let's say, organization. Be that via some form of commercial insurance or charitable organization, which is how things were before the Weimar Republic and the early 1900s. Otto von Bismarck implemented the first social kind of welfare programs in Germany, and then
So these types of things would not. They are hard to implement in this sort of
they're
system.
easy to implement, and the hard things to implement are nukes. How do you deal with people having nukes, and how do you deal with children?
So-
So the whole question about like whether children are fully rightful citizens and when they become that, and like that's like a bit of a gray area.
But there's this idea that the best use case for a state is to protect you against other states. So the best use case
The military is one of the so the military is one of the more harder issues to solve, but there are good theories and good arguments of why eventually that could be they could be provided by free market as well. But like nukes is different because like weapons of mass destruction,
what
the trade-offs are not the trade-offs, but like the cost of an error is so much bigger.
What do you feel about this idea that when like the example was in the US, if there would be a civil war, it's not so clear where the Democrats are and the Republicans are. They're spread out randomly, kind of. So the same thing, like in this modern day, it's hard to do maybe warfare if people are spread out on. You do know what I'm getting at?
Well, there are countries that are, let's say, would be more than happy to nuke some of their own to get rid of like Israel, let's say.
Right.
Because Israel has a significant Arab population, and not only that, but like Muslim Arab population.
True.
But in the Islamic tradition of war, that's just like a sacrifice we have to make.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
they will be, kill everybody. The God will see like the God will distinguish like, I know how to say it in Russian, like his own from the enemy, right?
Fair enough. Yeah, physical violence is difficult to deal.
Yeah.
How do you think? Yeah. Fair enough.
So Econ Talk by Russ Roberts is one of the great podcasts about just the world affairs, because he does, as an economics professor, he does cover every topic, and his podcast has been around since 2006, and he interviewed like every probably significant person, at least in the English-speaking academia, and like on that side of things, especially like regarding like immigration issues, startups, AI, more recently, and so forth. Currently, he is kind of more Israel-centric because he moved to Israel to become head of one of the universities in Jerusalem.
That's a bad timing.
Yeah, and so most of his episodes, he does an episode once a week. So now it's just Israel. But like if you go back into the archives that he has, it's every topic on earth, like from urban planning, like congestion, issues, like with like how do it, make the tolls on the roads,
Interesting.
and so forth. Like just go to to his website if you're interested in that, and it's also a libertarian perspective because he is kind of coming from that side of things. There's one, if you speak Russian, a good guy to follow is Mikhail Svetov. He's like arguably the head of the Russian libertarian movement at the moment, if there is any to speak of. And he's kind of took a populist approach rather than more like an academic approach. And he started to talk about libertarianism and the governments and the issues of politics and so forth, and tying everything together and culture and so forth in the form of YouTube videos and interviews that he did with people.
Where is he based? Do you know?
Currently, he would be there's a criminal case against him in Russia.
100%.
Yeah, and he's in Brazil. He's in Rio.
Okay.
But he travels a lot, so like maybe we can get somebody to get him here. He would have like back to the issue that we talked off camera about the Russians being cancelled in the West and having to live in a parallel like financial system and having to rely on crypto and having to juggle all of the different residencies and try to get different passports
while being shunned.
And how that would make Russians an interesting, early adopters for the network state concept and like for whatever is happening here.
You said they are one of the largest users of USDT. Are you sure about this?
No. I said in like specifically in like Serbia, for example, and so forth. Because I actually know a guy who runs an exchange office, and his business is obviously exchanging Serbian dinar to euros. But he makes a lot of money from Russians, trying to get money out of Russia and into cash effectively, because typically it's hard for them to get a bank account even in Serbia, which is supposedly a friendly country and perceived as a friend of Putin. But still, I tried to open a bank account in Serbia as a Belarusian. It's still hard.
It is kind of hard to get international banking. It takes a lot of hustle and work. It's not easy, especially probably depending on your passport.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. The passport is because there was a situation like I went around with my friend who lives in Serbia, and we went to a number of banks, and he was trying to open an account as well because he lives there permanently and he would like benefit from a different account. And there was a while since he moved there, so he already established some rules, and there was more allegedly, reason for them to not be as distrustful of him anymore, because he's now like lived there for a while. But still, they were telling him, no, we cannot open you an account, and it's because of your passport.
They said
and it was a Belarusian passport.
That's rough. That's really rough. Are you yourself deep into crypto?
Not as much, not as deep as I would have, but as I would like to be.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I knew about it early on, but I wasn't sold for many years. So I found out about Bitcoin probably in 2012. But there was a lot of arguments that I bought back then that basically there's still a debate in the Austrian School of Economics about whether Bitcoin can be money, because it didn't emerge from a commodity.
Yes, it's always a debate,
right? So that's the Peter Schiff argument.
What do you do for fun?
I watch videos on YouTube about urban design and urbanism. I dig I dig like internets for underground and obscure music.
Nice.
And collect it on my hard drive.
Like what type of music are we talking about?
Like experimental art, pop music, weirds a little bit or all the way, like what's called freak folk music.
Freak folk music.
Yeah,
never heard about.
That's fun.
How large is your hard drive of music?
I guess between 1 and 2 terabytes.
What? That's a lot.
It's mostly MP3s also, so
that's a crazy amount, dude. What about urban planning? What do you see that the modern cities in general? What do you feel?
They're shit.
What could we do better?
Oh, everything has to be torn down and build anew. Like all of this. This is all wrong.
city. Well, how do you mean?
Well, so basically, I can give you like a meta narrative if you want.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So basically, there were like hundreds of years and thousands of years of people like living in in mid space, like they tell,
Yeah.
like they say now, and trying to figure out the best ways to create a built environment that would be conducive to a good public life, to good like to a function like high function society,
Yeah.
and also to wellness of the each individual member of the society.
Yeah, so this was originally the case. When?
We're talking like all the way until 1920s.
Okay.
And in the 1920s, as if the case in every other area of life, if you talk to some people like money, health, there came these essentially Marxists, or sometimes that the fascists came first in some areas, but the fascists were also socialists. It's just that the fascists are non-Marxist socialists, but effectively they are also collectivists. And the idea was that we can remake society from the ground
Like
up.
hierarchical, top-down type control.
It's not about control. It's about like reshaping the nature of human and what it means to be a human.
Yeah.
And so the socialists had this idea that all of the human suffering and all of the, pain that we have as humans, wars, poverty, and so forth, that's a product of capitalism. And capitalism, in turn, is the product of an estrangement of humans from their true nature, which is, they thought, communist, meaning that we have the society imposing on us this need to consume and to,
Yeah. So it's kind of ties into what Balaji was talking about.
Yeah.
The 1900 was a very weird century.
yeah,
It's not at all how it was for thousands of years before.
yeah.
So
That applies to almost everything.
so and also how we build the urban cities.
So the urban cities is, they said, like we will no longer build cities that are based on a grid or based like on block block structures, and based on streets streets and like squares and so forth as the public realm that is being created as a topological kind of thing by the buildings that surround it. We will just instead like build buildings as separate objects that we will subsequently, as architects, will create to satisfy our our own grandiosity, because we will make these buildings more and more extravagant, and we will use the current technology to get rid of all of the previous knowledge of how to build buildings sustainably and again,
so what would
to
be
the right scale. And also we will make like everything oriented around the automobile.
Yeah, the automobile is a big one.
Yeah. So like everything had to be torn down to accommodate the automobile. So and that's what they did. They got rid of all of the human knowledge accumulated by trial and error, by this emergent order of people trying things and learning from their mistakes and perfecting the craft of building, not just buildings, but the whole communities and cities. They got rid of all that. They got rid of everything that was kind of perfected by centuries, to replace it with their own idea that we're kind of the new people here. We have this new ideology that says like we can create a new type of man that will be socialist or fascist, and he will function completely different, and for that we need to completely reshape everything, and in some cases tear everything down and build anew. In some cases just like building by building, block by block.
But for our lifetime, it seems like, for instance, the automobile is here to stay. Like we can't get away from it. It's gonna be in our lifetime.
That's not true. There's a lot of cities that have been since the 1980s realizing that when they replaced the public realm that is made for people for the public realm that didn't exist actually, because like all of the space was dedicated to the automobile, they lost something really necessary for the functioning of the society, but also in terms of well-being.
Yeah, I believe that actually.
And there's a good book on that is actually very interesting and not, as I was referring before, not really. It's quite dense in terms of that. You read and every page has interesting ideas. By Jane Jacobs, Life and Death of Great American Cities. That was the foundational book of this new urbanism movement.
Interesting.
And she said that basically when we started to redesign our cities for automobile, we started to create a society that starts to divide more and more apart between the social classes, the political ideologies, because, for example, people no longer meet each other. People of different classes live in different condominiums, live in different
They just drive by the car past.
Yeah, exactly.
So what is some example of cities that have changed this? Is there such
every American city probably,
but
with the exception of New York,
to have changed back, you know?
So I was talking about so like Amsterdam in the 80s, in the 70s, and the early 80s was an automobile dumpster, and now it's famously a city where everybody either walks or takes a bike or takes a tram.
True that.
And you only use a car for going out of town, or in rare cases, like you need something that cannot be done without a car within the city. And you would never think, and like all of the streets that are currently all pedestrian in Amsterdam, I'm not sure, like, I don't want to say all, but like, okay, most of them were automobile-oriented streets 40 years ago. And they just realized that they're losing something very important and turn it back.
Because it's in Helsinki, where I'm from, it's a big discussion now that they kind of want to close down the main street in the city center.
Yeah.
But there's like 50% that are like, hey, we really want this. It's
important. Like that every time. But then like when they actually do it, and that's like, I know that I'm sounding less like a libertarian now and more like an authoritarian, but like I could make a case that city is not a market. City is a platform, and the platform needs a government that is centralized. Because city is like more like a mall rather than like, a free market of different merchants around the country. Anyway, so like
cities seem to work quite nice with the
sometimes if you do it right, you can pretend to be a new urbanist and be like an authoritarian and still do everything wrong. That's also the case in many cities. But when they actually implement something like that, and they ask the same people again in 5 years who were against it, they suddenly now love their public spaces that are pedestrian, that are safe for children, and so forth. So like the reason they're opposing it now is because they are just cannot comprehend like how can it work any different way, because they grew
normal
up
human behavior.
They grew up relying on automobile. And there's a good kind of a metaphor in the American new urbanist circles that the automobile has become from a tool of convenience into a prosthetic device. Yeah. You cannot do anything without it. If you live in America, you like live in one of those like anywhere except like New York and a bunch of cities like that.
Did you visit Singapore now?
I just passed through it on a private cab, and I didn't see much of the cities. I saw mostly the highway.
Yeah, fair enough. Then we shall not discuss it.
But I heard that it's not walkable at all.
It's not the great. It's at least not bikeable. But the subway is very good, and public transport, I feel like. But the sidewalks are kind of small. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, transport is important as well. But so I was saying that if you live in America and you're like a school kid, you cannot go anywhere until you're 16. You have to have like somebody drive you if you want to have any vacations.
It's kind of crazy.
And that's why American women become those soccer moms, and they have to cut down their social lives, their professional lives to just become a full-time driver.
It's very weird actually that we don't live close to each other like we used to.
That was the idea of also the progressive movement, the socialist movement in the 1920s that saw the cities of late 19th century that were polluted because the industry was next to where people lived, and that's why people had asthma and all of those lung diseases and everything. And they thought that, okay, we now separate the industry from where people live, and they came up with the concept of like usage-based zoning. To zone all of the land based on how it can be used or not. And then, then they've done that. But then, what do we do as a profession now? And they just couldn't come up with anything better than just to keep zoning further and further. As to now, by the end of 20th century, every use was separate. Like shopping was separate from where people live. Parks were separate. So like everything becomes a trip in your life, and that's how American thinks. And that when you talk to American, where you consume content created by American, you can see that pattern repeating because that's how they think. Like they think of the world as this, a collection of locations that you move between in a car, rather than we as Europeans. And I sound so posh when I said that. We tend to think about like the ideal state being that a journey needs to be as pleasant as the destination.
That's a very good idea.
And we think about the public realm, like when you go on, like you go get some bread, you enjoy. Like I live in Budapest now. Every time I go like buy some bread, it's like I'm in a museum.
But this was because it was built before 1920, essentially.
Yeah. So that's kind of two separate topics. The architecture became ugly because they thought that all of the ornaments and everything that is associated with the architecture of classical and vernacular architecture of before the 20th century was outdated because it was catering to the bourgeois, desires of people for pretty things. And now we're like, as we're striving to become new people, we have to be practical and quadratisch.
Quadratisch, like a square.
Yeah. And the urban design also like changed. So the architecture, urban design, they go hand in hand because mostly informed by the same types of ideas.
That's a very lovely overview, and I tend to agree. Now the question is, can we actually cause change to come back?
That's the hardest thing, probably, because the city governments are, these are already existing structures, and you have to exercise voice in them to cause change. As I said, there are many cities that are changing. Sometimes, going all the way, like in Budapest, they're actually not only trying to do more like people-oriented urban development than automobile, but they're also bringing back old buildings and like reconstructing the buildings that were lost during the war or raised by the commies after the war. And they're reconstructing them using sometimes the same material, sometimes like just like creating a facade that looks the same, but that's okay already.
Are you optimistic, or how do you think it will change? Will we change?
There is as I'm saying, there is a movement to bring back classical architecture, and it's from the ground up. But again, on the other hand, there is all of that resistance from all of the people that have their special interests, and the architectural profession hates that. They cannot. Because they think that classical architecture, now that Hitler lost the war, and they say it's fascist because Hitler had this architect. Oskar Spengler was the chief architect of the Third Reich, and he was like a lot of into the classical. And now they can claim that not only they just disliked classical architecture, from the 1920s to the 1940s because it didn't, agree with their preconceived notions of remaking the human nature, but they also like have this cudgel against the classical that you're just Nazis and so forth.
Was it so that the Nazis were doing good architecture? Is that what you're saying?
So Spengler also did modernist buildings. That's the fun.
And they were the boxes and the squares and
Yeah.
But he also did the good stuff, the pre-1920s.
The plan that he had for Berlin, with the giant palace, whatever they had, that you can see if you watch the movie, the series Man in the High Castle, right? They recreated that in 3D.
I haven't seen it. Very cool.
It's about like what would happen if Nazis won, and it's set in 1960s, and it has this like visions of Berlin built out according to Spengler's plan. And
must have been epic.
It's a lot of classical buildings, yeah
nice.
But also like
they had nice uniforms as well. The Nazis, they were kind of beautiful uniform-wise.
Maybe
compared to other.
Yeah, I'm less knowledgeable about fashion.
But fair enough.
As you can see.
No, no, I think you're good.
But it's very selective how they use something like that to justify like that we should do something this way or the other way, because we still use Volkswagen, and Volkswagen is not
Yes.
culture. It's just the classical architecture that's
100%.
cancelled.
Very interesting. Where can people find you online? Are you active on X or something like this?
I'm not active on X, but like maybe I should make my account public now that I'm here.
Yeah, why not? It's you have nothing to lose.
Yeah, okay. It's just that it's been private while I've been living in London because I was so afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So x.com/VAKROLME, and
Nice.
that's my nickname.
Excellent. Hey, thanks for this. This was fun.
Likewise,
Let's-
that's it.